Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I had just moved to this city about 6 months ago for my new job at a tech startup. The pay was great, but the work hours were intense, which meant I rarely had time to socialize. My best friend from college happened to live here too, and we made it a point to meet up at least once a month for what we called our cheap therapy sessions, basically shopping at budget stores and complaining about life. This Saturday, we were at this massive clothing store that's famous for its ridiculously low prices. The place is always packed, and despite having what seems like hundreds of employees, the clothes are perpetually in disarray. My friend needed some new t-shirts for work, and I was just tagging along, mostly scrolling through my phone while she browsed. That's when I heard it, a sound that can only be described as a banshee having a meltdown in a department store. Curious, I peeked around a clearance rack, and what I saw made my jaw drop. There was this young girl, probably in her late teens, wearing jeans and a bright red hoodie. She had headphones on and was clearly not an employee. The store uniform was all black with a name tag, which she definitely wasn't wearing. But this other woman, let's call her Karen, was turning redder by the second, with actual spittle forming at the corners of her mouth. She was waving around this absolutely hideous zebra-leopard hybrid pattern top like she was trying to flag down a rescue helicopter. Karen started screaming that she wanted the shirt in her size. When the girl didn't respond, Karen got even angrier and demanded that she turn around and take off her headphones, yelling about how the girl shouldn't wear them while a customer was talking to her. By this point, the girl had hunched her shoulders and was speed walking away from Karen. A crowd had started gathering. Other shoppers, employees, my friend and me. We were all watching this train wreck unfold. Karen's voice got even shriller as she threatened to have the girl fired for disrespecting a customer if she didn't stop walking away. The girl stopped by a display of jeans and started looking through them, probably trying to act normal and hope Karen would go away. Big mistake. Karen saw her opportunity and moved with the speed of a caffeinated cheetah. She lunged across the aisle and grabbed the girl's headphones, yanking them off her head. Karen launched into a tirade, calling the girl worthless retail trash and saying she'd never been so disrespected in her life. She ranted about how she paid the girl's wages and threatened to get her fired, screaming that she'd make sure the girl never worked in this city again. The girl managed to break free from Karen's grip and finally snapped. She screamed back that she didn't work there, calling Karen a stupid bat and saying she'd already told her this 5 times. She begged Karen to leave her alone. She shoved Karen away, sending her crashing into a display of men's shirts. Right then, a manager showed up with security. It took both of them to hold Karen back as she tried to start a full-on catfight. She kept screaming threats about calling corporate and getting everyone fired while attempting to punch the security guard. The manager spoke to some employees who had witnessed everything, then turned to Karen. He explained that the girl didn't work there and was actually a valued customer who had been enjoying her shopping until Karen attacked her. He told Karen that she needed to leave the store and warned that if she returned, they would call the police and press charges for assault. Karen didn't just get kicked out. When she was being escorted to the exit, still screaming threats, another customer stepped forward and showed everyone a video they'd recorded of the whole incident. Turned out they'd started filming as soon as Karen began harassing the girl. The manager immediately called the police, and Karen was arrested for assault right there in the parking lot. The girl was still shaking and clearly upset, but the manager was incredibly kind. Not only did he give her a store gift card, but he also had her entire basket of clothes given to her for free. Last I saw, she was being escorted to her car by security, just in case Karen had any friends lurking around. My friend didn't end up getting her t-shirts that day. Let me tell you about an incident that happened at my local computer store. Some background about me: I'm 5 feet 6 inches, 180 pounds, and I have to walk with a cane due to a disability. Before my injury, I was in the military and practiced martial arts for years. I also deal with mild post-traumatic stress from my service. I'm a huge computer enthusiast and spend a lot of time at this computer parts store near my workplace. My cane has a wooden shaft with a solid pewter handle, which becomes relevant later. One day, my coworker asked for help building a computer, so we went to the store together. We were browsing motherboards and discussing different components when another customer overheard us and approached me with a question about hard drives. I politely explained that I didn't work there, but since we were heading to that section anyway, I offered to help if I could. The customer apologized for his mistake, and when I told him it was no problem, he went ahead and asked his question. We had a pleasant conversation about hard drive brands and speeds. After he left, my coworker and I were about to move on when we heard a shrill voice behind us. A woman was demanding to know if we were going to help them. We turned around to see a couple in their mid-30s, a bottled blonde woman and a massive guy who looked like he lived at the gym. I was wearing blue jeans and a light blue polo, nothing like the store uniform of black pants and white button-downs, with name tags. When I asked if they were talking to us, the woman demanded to know if I worked there. I tried to explain that I didn't, but before I could finish, her husband interrupted me. He aggressively told me I better help his wife, claiming they'd wasted enough time waiting. My coworker tried to lead me away, knowing I don't take well to being pushed around. I attempted to explain again, this time more firmly, that I didn't work there, and pointed to an actual employee at the end of the aisle, suggesting they ask him for help instead. The woman insisted I must work there since I'd helped the other customer. I responded by pointing out that the other customer had been polite and pleasant, while she was acting like an entitled brat who thinks she gets whatever she wants. The woman accused me of lying about not working there. I emphasized once again, slowly and clearly, that I did not work there and asked them to leave us alone. When we turned to leave, the husband grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. I nearly lost my balance because of my disability. He jabbed 2 fingers into my chest, but before he could say anything, I grabbed his fingers and used a self-defense move that can dislocate them. He dropped to his knees, and in his confusion, he tried to headbutt me in the groin. That's when my pewter-handled cane came in handy. I simply moved it to block him, and he slammed his forehead right into the metal handle. He blinked a few times and fell backward. The woman started screaming for help and demanding someone call the police. A store employee who'd seen everything tried to calm the situation, but the woman wouldn't listen. She demanded that I be fired, insisting that I had attacked her and her husband. When the manager arrived, the woman immediately claimed I was an employee who had attacked them. The manager asked if she meant the actual store employee, but she called him a moron and pointed at me instead. When the manager told her that I didn't work there, she sputtered, pointing out that I had been helping other customers. Her husband, now sporting a huge bump between his eyes and turning red with rage, started throwing items out of the shelves, since he couldn't get to me. The police arrived quickly. The woman immediately changed her story, now claiming I had tried to rape her, and her husband was defending her. The first customer I'd helped came back and spoke to one of the officers. It turns out they were old school friends, and he explained what he'd witnessed. When the officers tried to arrest her husband, the woman went berserk and attempted to bite one of them. She got tackled and ended up with a bloody lip, nose, and black eye. Her husband was charged with disorderly conduct, assault, assault against a disabled person, resisting arrest, and vandalism. She got charged with assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. The manager and employee gave us a huge discount for our trouble. I still shop there regularly, and we all laugh about it now. The funny thing is, I would have helped them if they just asked nicely in the first place. I've been working in security for almost a decade now, starting as a regular guard and working my way up to supervisor at one of the city's top property management companies. The job can be challenging, especially since the pandemic hit, but I take pride in keeping our residents safe and maintaining order in our buildings. Yesterday was supposed to be a regular day of supervising my team across different properties, but one of my guards called in sick last minute for his shift at our most prestigious condominium. Finding immediate replacements isn't easy these days, so I decided to cover the shift myself until dispatch could find someone. I figured I'd be there from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Just 3 hours, no big deal. This building is one of those luxury high-rises where units sell for millions of dollars. We've had to keep all the amenities closed due to the pandemic. The gym, pool, games rooms, everything. It's a necessary precaution since sanitizing these areas hourly would cost a fortune, and controlling occupancy would be a nightmare. Around 4 p.m., I noticed on the security cameras a real estate agent and his client entering the building. Nothing unusual there. We get property viewings all the time. They spent about half an hour viewing different units, but then I spotted something interesting on the elevator camera. They kept trying to access the amenities floor, but of course, the elevator wouldn't respond since that floor was locked down. After a few failed attempts, they came back to the main floor. The agent walked straight up to my desk, his expensive suit matching his expensive attitude. The agent didn't even bother with pleasantries. He just demanded that I unlock the amenities floor, speaking to me like I was beneath him. I kept my cool and explained that the amenities were closed due to pandemic restrictions and that no one was allowed access to that floor. That's when he got really nasty. He started bragging about how many units he'd sold in the building, implying that he was somehow more important than me. When I stood my ground, he resorted to insults, calling me a minimum wage rent-a-cop. Then he threatened that if I didn't unlock the floor, he'd take the stairs to another floor and break in himself. I warned him that such actions would be considered trespassing and I'd have to call the police. His client, trying to act tough, told me to go ahead and call them. So I did right then and there. I called 911 and explained to the operator that I had two individuals threatening to break into a restricted area and damage property. I mentioned they were being verbally aggressive and I was worried things might escalate. The real estate agent's face turned red when he realized I wasn't bluffing, though his client kept up his smug attitude. 5 minutes later, two officers arrived. Officer Rodriguez spoke with me first while Officer Chen approached the agent and his client. I gave Officer Rodriguez a full account of what happened. Meanwhile, I could hear the agent and his client telling Officer Chen a completely different story, claiming that I had threatened them and made racist remarks when they were just trying to do their job. That's when I smiled and offered to show them the security footage with audio. Officer Chen came over, and we played the last 20 minutes of footage. Officer Chen took photos of the agent's broker license and told him that the footage and report would be sent to the real estate board. Then he turned to the client and advised him against buying a unit in the building. When the client asked why, Officer Chen explained that he was now banned from the property and would be arrested for trespassing if he returned. The agent tried to salvage the situation, stammering about his reputation and claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but Officer Rodriguez shut him down. He pointed out that threatening to break and enter, trying to intimidate security personnel, and then lying to police officers were serious offenses, and they were lucky not to be arrested. They were escorted out with the agent looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. Later that evening, I received an email from the real estate board confirming they'd received the police report and footage, and they were launching an immediate investigation into the agent's conduct. The next day, I learned that this wasn't the agent's first complaint. Apparently, he had a history of aggressive behavior and misrepresenting properties. The real estate board suspended his license pending a full investigation. As for his client, word got around to other buildings in the area, and he's now blacklisted from viewing properties in several of our high-end developments. I had just finished veterinary school and was drowning in student debt, so I needed a cheap place to live fast. The rental market was tough, and that's how I ended up with the worst roommate ever. I found the place through a mutual friend who knew someone looking for a third roommate. The house wasn't anything special, a small 3-bedroom with a decent backyard, but the rent was right, and I could bring my border collie. That was non-negotiable for me. After working at animal shelters throughout college, I'd rescued her as a puppy, and we'd been inseparable ever since. The first meeting with my potential roommates seemed fine. One was a quiet nursing student who kept to herself, and the other, well, let's just say first impressions can be deceiving. She seemed friendly enough, mentioned she had 2 German shepherds, and as a vet, I figured having another dog person in the house would be great. I couldn't have been more wrong. Within the first week, I realized what I gotten myself into. My roommate was a nightmare. Her idea of pet care was leaving her German shepherds in the backyard all night while she went bar hopping. The dogs would bark constantly, and our neighbors, a young family with a toddler, were understandably not thrilled. When I politely asked her to bring the dogs in at night because of the neighbors' complaints, she dismissed me completely. She replied with some nonsense about how dogs naturally bark, and if people don't want to hear it, they shouldn't live in a neighborhood. That was the level of reasoning I was dealing with. That was just the beginning. The dishes would pile up for months, and somehow I got blamed for every single one despite barely using the kitchen. I eventually switched to paper plates and plastic utensils just to avoid the drama. Bills were always late, and asking her to pay her share was like pulling teeth. Whenever we'd bring up the overdue bills, she'd accuse us of harassing her about money and claim she'd pay when she got paid. When I pointed out that the electric bill was 3 weeks past due, she snapped back that some people had actual lives and couldn't sit around counting pennies all day. That was her typical response to any reasonable request. The situation got even worse when she decided to dog sit for a friend. Now we had 5 large dogs in our tiny house, her 2 German shepherds, my border collie, and 2 more hyperactive dogs that seemed to have never heard of indoor voices. True to form, she left all the dogs outside when she went to bed, and they started their nightly chorus right under my window. After 2 nights of being kept awake until 3 a.m. and having to let them in myself, I'd had enough. We'd already had 4 visits from the police about noise complaints, with the last officer warning us that the next time would result in a ticket. I sent her what I thought was a reasonable message about keeping the dogs inside overnight to avoid the threatened police ticket. Her response was anything but reasonable. She fired back, accusing my dog of being the one who barked all day, called my pet boring, and demanded I put the dogs back outside immediately. When I reminded her about the 4 previous police visits, she declared she didn't care about the cops and threatened to call the landlord with full claims about my dog being aggressive. This was ridiculous considering my dog spent most of her time quietly sleeping in my room or working with me at the vet clinic where I'd recently started. But you know what? She wanted the dogs outside? Fine by me. I opened the back door, let all 5 dogs out, and they immediately started their barking symphony. Then I grabbed my overnight bag, which I'd started keeping packed for situations exactly like this, got in my car, and drove to my friend's place. I sent her one last message letting her know I put the dogs outside as she requested and told her to enjoy her night. The next day, I came home to find her having an absolute meltdown. The neighbors had called the police again, and this time they'd followed through with their warning. She'd been slapped with a $350 ticket. But it gets better. The officer had also reported the situation to animal control due to concerns about neglect, and they were scheduled to do a welfare check. She immediately started screaming that I had set her up and demanded that I pay the ticket. I simply reminded her that I'd done exactly what she asked by putting the dogs outside. The animal control visit was the final straw for our landlord. After they cited her for multiple violations, including inadequate shelter and excessive noise, she was given an ultimatum. Either the German shepherds had to go, or she did. She moved out 2 weeks later, taking her dogs and her drama with her. The quiet nursing student and I split the rent between us until we found a new roommate, a lovely veterinary technician who actually understands responsible pet ownership. Sometimes I see posts from her on social media complaining about how impossible it is to find pet-friendly housing in this city. I just smile and scratch my border collie's ears, grateful that karma finally caught up with her. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.